Nashina Miranda is a registered therapeutic counselor in private practice, a part-time manager at a lovely clinic in Port Moody, mom to an awesome 19-year-old son, a dog mom, a wife to a wonderful man, a daughter, a sister, a friend, and most importantly, a believer in the inherent goodness within each of us. Nashina is grateful to do what she loves professionally in helping people uncover, discover, and embody the very best of themselves. Nurturing her own story of struggle and strife, she has learned the only way out is through. She has made it her mission to support others in that journey through volunteer work as well. Nashina has been a workshop facilitator and ambassador for Free to Be Talk since 2016, which is a body image media literacy program for elementary age children. Most recently, she joined the Be Beautiful Foundation and Dress for Success Vancouver as a mentor and workshop facilitator. Nashina is so grateful to have the opportunity to inject a sense of hope, confidence, and empowerment wherever and whenever she can. We're going to jump right into this conversation with Nashina, where I'm asking her about where she's at right now.
It's a very weird stage. It's a weird stage because my kid is off to university. He's out of the nest around the same time that I made this career change from, 20 years in a field beforehand. So there's this like push and pull of like this excitement of pursuing something new and different, and then also this little like side whisper of like you should have been here by now, or like you're sort of I'm excited to do it, but I also feel like I'm not further along than I would like to be. That ties into this sort of notion of like this chronological thing, right? That we're supposed to follow, which I've always been really rebellious of intentionally.
Yeah.
And so I find it just an interesting space because I'm feeling that creep up and I'm also not being sucked down by it. But it's just interesting to have it like lull around in the back,
So can you tell me a little bit about how you've managed to, like, when you feel that tug of, I should be further along by now, why am I not, where I thought I would be, or something like that? How do you talk to that voice? How do you kind of keep it at bay, or do you befriend it? Do you ignore it? Like, what do you do?
I think all of it, all of what you described, I think it depends on the day, the mood, the season, sometimes they're easier than others. But I feel like most often than not, I have to remind myself, or I like to remind myself of where I started. I kind of did things a little bit in reverse, if you will, right? As far as kind of having my son really young and doing the parenting thing, if you will, a lot earlier in life. And so, am I missing out on anything, or am I doing it wrong? No, it's just, it's out of order from what we are presented. And so there's something about that innately feels like I have to rumble with. But then when I remind myself of the accomplishments of young motherhood and how that's perhaps prepared me for where I'm at now, where maybe I wouldn't have been before, like it's a nice kind of humbling space to be in, right?
I love that. I love the focus on, what have I achieved up till now, and how is everything actually working out in perfect timing, right? Instead of always kind of, because we can have a tendency to beat ourselves up about things not going the way that maybe we when we were a teenager or something. We thought that our life was going to turn out a specific way. But that focus on, look at all the things that I've done, look at all the ways that I've become this person who's now perfectly capable and ready to take on this next step.
Yeah, what the interesting thing about that too is just even hearing you describe it, like, and maybe most of us can relate to this if we have siblings. Like, I have an older sister who followed a very traditional sort of structural way of pursuing education and her degrees and schooling, and worked and did all of the, like, if you had a checkbox list, like, she's a Capricorn through and through, and good on her. she did what she wanted to do, right? But then to sort of be the younger sibling next to her in this lane beside her, going every which way but that, like forward, right? I was kind of like a pop can that exploded at various times along the way. It sells, it's, or at least for me, it sold me this idea of that I was doing it wrong, right? Like, you look to the left and you look to the right and you see, culturally or in our society in particular, right? It looks a certain way most often than not. So that can really mess with sort of the trust that you are trying to hang on to with your decisions, whether they are deliberate, conscious decisions or they just sort of happened. So that was an interesting sort of path for me to unfold as I went too.
Well, that kind of ties in, like when you're talking about, that kind of comparison with your sister, right? And then thinking about how does it look in our culture, or like, how do I hold on to the sense of trust in myself when other people seem like they're doing it a different way? How did you manage to stay true to who you are and to the decisions that you made, regardless of how it differed from other people?
I don't know that I can even put that into words. I mean, hindsight's always a gift, right? But I think in it, from a really young age, I always remember having a very deep, like physical sense of feeling really like in touch or in tune with what I wanted and where I wanted to go. I don't think that I could articulate that necessarily until much later, but there was always this visceral feeling of, I need to do this or I have to stick with that. Even getting pregnant as young as I did, the choice of just moving forward and whatever will unfold was quite definitive for me. And I even now really can't explain it. When I look back on it, I understand it to be lessons that I needed to learn, and it was presented and gifted to me in this way. I don't know that I saw it like that then. But now I can absolutely say it for sure. But I don't quite know what it was then. It was just a really in touch feeling that I had.
This idea that I'm just gonna move forward with this, and I'm just gonna be as strong as I can for this little boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is I think becoming a mom is the biggest motivator to just become our best selves, kind of like get through the day firstly, and then once we've managed to get through the day over and over for a few years, then we focus on being the best role model that we can, right? So
yeah,
for
sure.
So you kind of mentioned that you had this 20-year career,
mm-hmm.
and then you decided, or maybe you felt pulled to do something different. Can you tell me about that process?
Yeah, and so I was in, and still am part-time, but in the cosmetic aesthetic industry, and more so in the medical aspect of it. But yeah, that was a field that I had jumped into in my early 20s and stayed in. And then I would say maybe about 8 years ago, maybe 9, I had found myself in therapy. Just really patterns were up in relationship choices and decision making that was really starting to highlight that perhaps I was a player in all of this as well. Go figure. And so
the best and the worst realization.
You're like, what do you mean I'm also a part of it?
It's everyone else's fault.
I know. And it, just to loop back to kind of having a child, there's really, again, for me, that was definitely if I wanted to sustain and build the most authentic relationship with him, I just knew I had to get myself sorted. And so I went in, and it was a few years of pretty consistent therapy and unearthing things that blew my mind, that never even were in my consciousness or awareness. And there was this elation and this massive grief all at the same time of recognizing that, yes, I was very much a deliberate player, but then there was also, generational things and stories and messages and lines and all these things that were sort of being passed down and I was carrying within me. And so it sort of, I just even now I'm exhaling because that's what it was for me. It was just this massive exhale of it's not all me. Like, yes, I am kind of like the manifestation of some of this, but it just allowed me an opportunity to give myself a bit of a break. And I think through that was just this instant shift. And I need to do this. I need to get into this for a career shift. And I was already feeling the pull that I wanted to do something different. This just happened to highlight it for me. And then I pursued that and went back to school.
Wow. So you had this kind of transformative experience where you recognized that the things that you've been carrying around were not all yours.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, kind of sounds like accepting that things were the way they were, but also taking responsibility for your part of it. Like, how do I kind of change the story now? How do I move this forward in a healing way or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it took a bit to get there, but I was big time on the accountability train. Like, once I understood what it was there for, like, once I understood the loving intention that accountability serves, and it's not linked into blame or further shaming me or anybody else, it was really just this ownership that fueled into empowerment, that fueled into movement and actionable steps that I could take on my own accord. That started to like make sense to me. And so the more I got to really play around with that, the more it sort of fueled me to keep going. Cause I'm like, I want more of this. I want more of what that feels like.
So that was cool what you said about almost like going over or understanding or something, like something happened to that shame and that blame, right? You were able to move past it in a way. Could you describe a little bit of what that process looks like for some of our viewers who maybe are stuck in that stage where they feel that shame and blame and they're not moving forward in their life because of it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I'm sure, we both know this just due to our fields and our work, it can look so different for everyone. But for me, it was messy because there was so much resistance. And the more I resisted, the harder it became. And so there's that surrender piece, right? That also plays such a huge part of it. But the way it showed up for me was very much, I've never been so much of a cognitive heady person. I'm really like in my body, very somatic. And so that's where I experienced the most, efficacious purge, if you will, was just working with and for and finding healers and teachers and shamans and therapists that would help me move it from that place. And so I guess to backtrack, it really became about learning and understanding and honoring how things were showing up for me, and then seeking out guidance, support, things, people that will help hold me there while I work to do that.
That guidance and support piece is so important, even if it's not a therapist, if it's just like someone you follow on YouTube or something to kind of keep you inspired or keep you moving. There's that saying, I don't know exactly what it is, but something like inspiration lasts about as long as a shower. Like, you need one every day. You need some inspiration every day.
Yeah.
It's not like you get inspired and it lasts forever. So keeping in mind that you can use all sorts of different people to help you on your journey, and kind of like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
So true.
I'm wondering about that. You talked about resistance and then surrender. And I wonder, if you could help us understand, maybe some of our viewers might want to know, like, how do I know if I'm resisting? Like, what does it feel like to resist, and what does it feel like to surrender?
For me, resistance felt, well, first of all, resistance sounded really chatty, right? Like there was a lot of chatter, a lot of like, that might sound a bit crazy to some people, but a lot of like inner dialogue, and sort of almost like there is this like evil alter ego twin, of mine chirping in the background all the time, having something to say at any given time. And so there was that sort of resistance piece. It felt energetically depleting, just incessantly tired and exhausted, and just kind of like weighed down, bogged down. That's kind of how it felt for me. Sometimes even just frozen, like just immobile. And there's that saying, when in doubt, do nothing. Well, I was in doubt a lot, and therefore I did nothing a lot. And so that only serves you for so long, because then what? You're standing still as your life is just passing by. And I just thought, like, this isn't good enough anymore. It's just not. So it's a really frightening thing to move against that, or move away from it. Really, I wouldn't even say moving against, because you're moving towards something better. It's just really hard to recognize that when there's so much fear.
That's so relatable. Like I've been there so many times in my life, right, where you just feel completely stuck. And then so that there's something going on here. There's some kind of resistance. There's some kind of fear or story that I'm telling myself, and that chatter in your head, right? Like, yeah.
The noise. Yeah, I felt like sometimes there was like, a party up there that I wasn't invited to. What's happening? Yeah, it's hard to figure it out.
And then how did you know that? Because it's really, like you were mentioning, those steps away from that resistance, those initial steps can be so challenging. It's so unfamiliar. We're doing something that we've never maybe done before. We're moving towards something good and something that feels inspiring and feels like it's pulling us. But at the same time, even just allowing ourselves to take that step, that next step, and that next step can be such a challenge. So what types of things did you do when you were moving away from the resistance towards that surrender?
Yeah, it can, I think sometimes, and I spoke to a client about this the other day, it's like there's such minuscule, tiny micro steps that they're easy to throw away. They're very easy to throw away as nothing, and it's not nothing. They're huge, right? So even just to name it, even just to know you're in resistance in and of itself is a win. Like that is a huge first step. And so then, for me, it was kind of like just trying to bring like a bit of kindness to that dialogue, right? Or even just being able to say to myself, I'm hearing this and I'm recognizing it's not me. It's just fear talking, or it's this shame talking, or it's the ego talking, or whatever you want to name it, to create some sort of separation so that you're not taking it on as who you are, as your identity, as your being. You're creating a little room, and that just lets you breathe a bit. Yeah. So that to me was really, really helpful as like a baby first step.
Yeah, I so love that. And I do that myself, actually. Even now, I'll say like, okay, that's a fear thought. I don't, and sometimes I'll entertain it for a while, and then I can just step back and be like, that's a fear thought. And it just sort of, it helps you to recognize that, okay, there's that thought. That thought is not reality. That thought doesn't mean necessarily anything. It just means that maybe I'm feeling a bit unsettled or insecure or something. And then once you know the feeling that's contributing to the thought, then you can work on changing the thought, changing your thoughts, or even just introducing a new thought or a new feeling, or moving your body to kind of just, stop being so stagnant, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it sounds like it was very much a process, a journey that took quite a while to
Mhm.
move from that state of being in resistance and feeling stuck and standing still to then recognizing that you had these fear thoughts, recognizing, like going through this whole journey of self-discovery. And then eventually there came a point when you said to yourself, like, I'm ready to do this next thing. Like how did that come about?
You know, I had like a mutual, or like a friend, an old friend of my sister's who had taken um, the counseling program. And so I just reached out for just some inquiry and maybe some guidance on her experience. And that I ended up at an information session where my partner, now husband, came with me, and thank God he did, because for me it would have been just an information session. I would have walked in, taken a whole butt ton of notes that I went home and never did anything with again. I feel like that's probably what would have happened, and because it would have been too scary. Like that would have been too big of a. I'll just sit on the information for like a year and think about it. Would have been what would have happened. So he came with, and they're signing up that day, like registering, and he's like, so, and of course, like Fear Train was like fully in the station, and he just encouraged me, and next thing you know, I was just signing on that dotted line to begin in like a couple weeks. And that was like the 3-year journey of going back to school as a single parent, working, just doing it, just figuring it out and making it happen.
So amazing that you're talking about how, that first step. First of all, sometimes you need a nudge. Sometimes you need like a cheerleader or a motivator. And it's important to kind of recognize like when you're being nudged in a direction you want to go and when you're being nudged in a direction you don't want to go, right? And how did you know that it was, even though it was so scary, like how did you know, oh, okay, this is actually like something that it's scary but good?
Because I wouldn't shut up about it. Like when I went to therapy for myself, I was like one of those annoying people that would like spill my therapy ahas to whomever would listen to me. And I was a massive oversharer. I'm like, everyone should go to therapy all the time, every time, even if you're happy, just go. You'll find out something.
So true.
And so every session I would have, I come home and Nelson, my again partner then husband now, he was so engaged. I'm not really sure that he cared all that much. Like he cared about me and my growth, but like all the nuances and a little like she made me do this exercise, and I would get into the nitty gritty, and he just knew that I was just passionate. And so I think when we went to that session, that nudge was absolutely in the right direction, because it was just like water for me. It just was like it lit me up in a way that I hadn't been lit up in a really long time.
And then you took that incredible first step of signing up.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't like, rainbows and unicorns. It was like years of grueling hard work. Yeah.
Mm.
And with the career shift like that, how did you stay motivated? How did you keep your eye on the ball, on the prize, I guess? Like, how did you do that?
Oh gosh. There's this part about me that I'm learning to really love, and that sometimes like my ignorance is bliss. Like I'm not a massive researcher. I don't deep dive into like I don't need to I don't crave figuring out everything before I go in. Part of that is a protection thing, right? It's like if I know all of it, then I ain't showing up. Like I'm not gonna go. So I think I knew that about myself on some level, and so I'm like, I'm not looking anything up. I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna go. I mean, for good or for bad, that's the way I rolled, and it worked for me.
Oh, love that.
And so, I encourage you guys out there to just give it a try one day. Just don't research something, just show up.
Totally.
It'll be spontaneous.
we did a labor and delivery workshop yesterday. I was part of it. I was just like a small part of it. I introduced people, but it's funny because the other ladies that I was talking to after who were not in a relationship right now or not, thinking about getting pregnant, they were like, that was the best birth control. I feel like labor is one of those things that you should just go in blind, no research.
I'm with you.
Just get in there, do it.
I'm with you. Yeah, I fully agree. Not everyone's on our page, but I'm sure we have some company, maybe like 5 people, who knows? Yeah, but it for me, it was really helpful. And so but I've always been that way. And I'm joking. I kid. I don't encourage you not to plan, of course. But I was lucky. I had my family, my parents, were very accessible and around. My son was 8, 9 by the time, or no, he was much older than that. I think maybe 13 or 14 by the time I went back, actually. And so, he was quite self-sufficient in many ways. And so I wasn't in fairness dealing with like a toddler, right? And so that was helpful. And then I had Nelson, for that degree of companionship and emotional support that I was lacking for so long as, a single mom. And so those things really did make a massive difference. And I think that for me, it was a learning in when my pursuit of something that is really exciting outweighs your fear. Like, watch how quickly you'll move.
So true.
And I think that's what it was for me. It was like status quo was not working anymore. And there was nowhere else to go but in that direction for me.
So you had kind of come to this point where standing still had become so uncomfortable that you just needed to move.
Yeah, and I would even go as far as to say beyond uncomfortable, it became frustrating. And frustrated with myself because there's this part of all of us that I believe deeply, and I'm sure you feel the same. It's like there's this, even if it's tiny, there's a part of me that knew I deserved, I wanted, I could do better.
Yeah.
I just knew that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why would I have bothered signing up? I just wouldn't have, Yes, I had the encouragement, but it was my hand that was moving on the page signing that document.
And then doing all the hard work after that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It took years of hard work.
Yeah.
So you had this inkling that I can do more. Mm-hmm. I deserve better. I deserve to be joyful in what I do. I deserve to bring light to the world in a way that's uniquely me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you went for it. And so you had all the social supports. The social support was really important for you. The faith, it sounds like, was really important for you. Like that, having faith in yourself and having faith that things would work out. Like, can you describe kind of the faith aspect of it that you brought to it?
Yeah, and I love that you're asking me that because again, honestly, Jena, I don't think that I would have called it that in it. Like, I don't think if you asked me this question while I was in it, I was still so insecure and unsure of myself that I would not have said I believe in myself. And I know I didn't, like those words would not have come out of my mouth. So again, it was something for me that was just such a feeling, but the feeling wouldn't find words yet. Maybe I wasn't ready. It was too frightening to say out loud. I'm not sure what it was. But I was really riding this synergy to what my body and my heart and my spirit, my vibe, whatever you want to call it, my energy was telling me to do. That might sound funny to some, but for me, that's kind of what it was.
Kind of like harnessing your intuition.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
So you kind of tapped into that intuition. Like there was a feeling that I'm just going to go for this. And I know in my body, like if someone else asked you, you might have said, no, it's like you would have played it off. Like, oh, it's no big deal. I'm just,
Yeah.
What happens. But at the same time, there was something inside of you that was really pulling you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And people would, marvel and like, I don't know how you're doing this. And got a son, and there was a lot of lovely positive praise, and I certainly let it in because I did feel quite proud that I made that kind of a jump, but there was this other piece of it that was like of shame, and I'm spending all this money that could be going to my son and saving for his education. Some looked at it as a very selfish act, like, like your kid's not even out of school and you're pursuing something for yourself, like, well, when you're not home with him all the time, and or you can't show up to every activity. And so there was this real mishmash, right, of both things from various angles that was coming my way too.
That is what you're talking about is so incredibly important. This idea of that it's okay actually to do something for yourself, even if you have kids. Like so many of us struggle with that. It's there's so much mom guilt, there's so much pressure. We're supposed to just like live and breathe for these kids, which we do. But then if we're not taking care of ourselves and doing things that light us up, how is that any good for them? I'm not really sure. I don't know that denying ourselves, forward movement would necessarily be beneficial for our kids. I'm not sure. Right?
Yeah. I mean, you make such a great point. And it was, at that age, I was lucky enough to be able to have conversations with Isaiah about like me pursuing this and why I was doing it and what my long-term intention and goals were. And for him and for his betterment and for the success of being able to provide in a way that I wanted to. And I always made it a point of like, it wasn't just that, it was for me too. And he needed to hear me say that because I was in an industry, fully saturated in it to a degree where I wasn't super, super happy. I wanted something a little bit different and I wanted something more. And so I needed to sort of really make that very clear that it's all for you and for us and for the family as a unit. And it's also for my own individual passion and desire and need to have something that I can call my own. And like he's in university, he's 19 and he's pursuing his own chapter of his own life. And so had I not done this, I would be twiddling my thumbs. Not to say I wouldn't have done it, who knows, right? But then I would have waited for what?
Exactly. Do you have any advice for any of the viewers who might be going through, who might be wanting to take time for themselves, might be wanting to start to put themselves first in certain aspects of their life so that they can show up more for their kids and their families, who might be struggling with that, like struggling with the mom guilt and the perceptions of other people and, maybe not attending all of their kids' events or, soccer games or whatever.
Yeah. Gosh, I feel like there's so much, but I would say, I think the biggest learning for me is that I don't know that we fully give our children credit for how understanding and smart they are, emotionally and otherwise. And so the power of dialogue and the power of like sitting down and talking to your little person about like in language that's appropriate for your 5, 6, 7, whatever you're old, right? And saying how mommy's just needs 5 minutes and this is why, and I'm going to go to the bathroom and I'm going to close the door. And when I'm in the bathroom, do you think you'd be okay to give me that 5 minutes? Like, how about we put on a song and from the beginning to the end of the song, that's going to be my time. And so like working with them rather than working against them, I think is huge. And then letting them witness you in your self-care. I mean, like, what better teacher is that to demonstrate what that's all about? So I think, to consider it from that lens and consider your acts of stealing small glimpses of time away for like a quiet bathroom moment. is teaching a lesson that we don't really take for really the importance of what that really is.
Yeah. It's so funny that you use that because that's so like every mom is like, yes, bathroom break. I would love to be able to close the door when I go to the bathroom.
Just let me shave both legs. That's all I want.
So now you have some time because Isaiah is in university now. Yeah, and you're starting your career, or you started it like
early in, but still, in it, yeah.
So what are some of the things that you're just savoring right now? Like, what are some of the things that you're really enjoying? What are some of the self-care practices that you have?
Mm-hmm. I'm loving the time, like I really love the space and the quietness of it and the freedom of just being able to do with it what I wish. So that's a real luxury. Some of the self-care pieces, more so lately, is just really getting into more of a consistent meditation practice. I've actually learned I don't do well with like this is the way my structured mornings. I'm not a structured morning type of person, and so what I have made a practice for myself is to wake up and ask myself that Danielle Laporte question. If anyone's a follower of hers, she has multiple workbooks, I guess you would call them. The desire map is one of them. But anyways, the main question I ask myself when I wake up is like, how do I feel, or how do I want to feel? And then based on that desired result, I will stretch, I'll meditate, I'll put on some sort of guided something. I'll go step outside the balcony, I'll take a breath of fresh air. Like, to me, it's like the frustration sometimes, like self-care is packaged in such a way that it looks like it has to be really involved and time consuming, and it doesn't. You can open up your window and literally just breathe in the morning air and hang on to that for like a few seconds, and that is your self-care. It can be just that.
Just making it really simple. What's the easiest thing I can do right now that would make me feel good?
Yeah, so nature is kind of my like playground. I relish in that quite a bit, so that's been a huge time pass lately.
Can you share what types of clients you see, how people can get in touch with you, where they can find you?
Yeah, sure. So, I seem to attract and enjoy working with women that might be in the same sort of struggle of what I had shared of my own journeys. So, particularly moms or just young women struggling with transition, self-esteem, body image, things of that nature. Relationship dynamics, of course, are always huge for all of us. I can be found at, or should I give you my website? Or yeah, it's Harbor Counseling and Wellness, and maybe I can send it your way if you want. And so it's just easy to hop on and get in touch with me there if you have questions or concerns or want to share your story. I would love to hear it.
Do you have any like social media that people can follow?
I do have a Facebook account and a LinkedIn. That's kind of as far as I've gotten so far. It's my work in progress with my social media presence. But yes, you can find me it's Nashina Merani Miranda on Facebook.
Yeah, I wish I could get rid of all of my social media. I've toyed with the idea many times.
I know. Yeah, I have a mixed relationship with it. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
It's complicated.
Yes, it's complicated. Indeed. Yeah. For sure.
Thank you so much, Nashina. This was amazing. I really, really enjoyed hearing your story, and also just some of the tools and techniques that you provide. They're so simple, and it really focuses on just like small moment by small moment. It doesn't have to be a huge shift that you do by the end of the day. It's just like, in this moment, what can I do to feel a little bit better? What can I do to recognize that this thought maybe isn't the best for me, or that it's a fear thought or a shame thought? What can I do? Right? To just kind of get myself in a different space. I really love that. Thank you.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. It was so nice.